Chapter 1. Hear You Loud and Clear. Punctually at 6 o'clock, the sun set with a last yellow flash behind the blue mountains, a wave of violet shadow poured down Richmond Road, and the crickets and tree frogs in the fine gardens began to zing and tinkle. Apart from the background noise of the insects, the wide, empty street was quiet. The wealthy owners of the big, withdrawn houses, the bank managers, company directors, and top civil servants, had been home since 5 o'clock, and they would be discussing the day with their wives, or taking a shower and changing their clothes. In half an hour the street would come to life again with the cocktail traffic, but now this very superior half-mile of Rich Road, as it was known to the tradesmen of Kingston, held nothing but the suspense of an empty stage, and the heavy perfume of night-scented jasmine. Richmond Road is the best road in all Jamaica. It is Jamaica's Park Avenue, its Kensington Palace Gardens, its Avenue Diana. The best people live in its big, old-fashioned houses, each in an acre or two of beautiful lawn set too trimly with the finest trees and flowers from the botanical gardens at Hope. The long, straight road is cool and quiet, and withdrawn from the hot, vulgar sprawl of Kingston, where its residents earn their money, and on the other side of the T intersection at its top lie the grounds of King's House, where the Governor and Commander-in-Chief of Jamaica lives with his family. In Jamaica, no road could have a finer ending. On the eastern corner of the top intersection stands number 1 Richmond Road, a substantial 2-story house with broad white-painted verandas running round both floors. From the road a gravel path leads up to the pillared entrance, through wide lawns marked out with tennis courts, on which this evening, as on all evenings, the sprinklers are at work. This mansion is the social mecca of Kingston. It is Queen's Club, which, for 50 years, has boasted the power and frequency of its black balls. Such stubborn retreats will not long survive in modern Jamaica. One day Queen's Club will have its windows smashed and perhaps be burned to the ground, but for the time being it is a useful place to find in a subtropical island, well-run, well-staffed, and with the finest cuisine and cellar in the Caribbean. At that time of day, on most evenings of the year, you would find the same 4 motor cars standing in the road outside the club. They were the cars belonging to the high bridge game that assembled punctually at 5 and played until around midnight. You could almost set your watch by these cars. They belonged, reading from the order in which they now stood against the curb, to the brigadier in command of the Caribbean Defence Force, to Kingston's leading criminal lawyer, and to the mathematics professor from Kingston University. At the tail of the line stood the black Sunbeam Alpine of Commander John Strangways, R.N. retired, Regional Control Officer for the Caribbean, or, less discreetly, the local representative of the British Secret Service. Just before 6:15, the silence of Richmond Road was softly broken. 3 blind beggars came round the corner of the intersection and moved slowly down the pavement towards the 4 cars. They were Chigros, Chinese Negroes, bulky men, but bowed as they shuffled along, tapping at the curb with their white sticks. They walked in file. The first man, who wore blue glasses and could presumably see better than the others, walked in front, holding a tin cup against the crook of the stick in his left hand. The right hand of the second man rested on his shoulder, and the right hand of the third on the shoulder of the second. The eyes of the second and third men were shut. The 3 men were dressed in rags and wore dirty jipper-japper baseball caps with long peaks. They said nothing, and no noise came from them, except the soft tapping of their sticks as they came slowly down the shadowed pavement towards the group of cars. The 3 blind men would not have been incongruous in Kingston, where there are many diseased people on the streets, but in this quiet, rich, empty street they made an unpleasant impression, and it was odd that they should all be Chinese Negroes. This is not a common mixture of bloods. In the card-room, the sunburned hand reached out into the green pool of the centre table and gathered up the 4 cards. There was a quiet snap as the trick went to join the rest. 100 honours, said Strangways, and 90 below. He looked at his watch and stood up. Back in 20 minutes. Your deal, Bill. Order some drinks. Usual for me. Don't bother to cook a hand for me while I'm gone. I always spot them. Bill Templar, the brigadier, laughed shortly. He pinged the bell by his side and raked the cards in towards him. He said, Hurry up, blast you! You always let the cards go cold just as your partner's in the money." Strangways was already out of the door. The three men sat back resignedly in their chairs. The coloured steward came in, and they ordered drinks for themselves and a whisky and water for Strangways. There was this maddening interruption every evening at 6:15, about halfway through their second rubber. At this time, precisely, even if they were in the middle of a hand, Strangways had to go to his office and make a call. It was a damned nuisance, but Strangways was a vital part of their four, and they put up with it. It was never explained what the call was, and no one asked. Strangways' job was hush, and that was that. He was rarely away for more than 20 minutes, and it was understood that he paid for his absence with a round of drinks. The drinks came, and the three men began to talk racing. In fact, this was the most important moment in Strangways' day, the time of his duty radio contact with the powerful transmitter on the roof of the building in Regent's Park that is the headquarters of the Secret Service. Every day at 18:30 local time, unless he gave warning the day before that he would not be on the air, when he had business on one of the other islands in his territory, for instance, or was seriously ill, he would transmit his daily report and receive his orders. If he failed to come on the air precisely at 6:30, there would be a second call, the blue call at 7, and finally the red call at 7:30. After this, if his transmitter remained silent, it was emergency, and Section 3, his controlling authority in London, would urgently get on the job of finding out what had happened to him. Even a blue call means a bad mark for an agent, unless his reasons in writing are unanswerable. London's radio schedules round the world are desperately tight, and their minute disruption by even one extra call is a dangerous nuisance. Strangways had never suffered the ignominy of a blue call, let alone a red, and was as certain as he could be that he never would do so. Every evening at precisely 6:15, he left Queen's Club, got into his car, and drove for 10 minutes up into the foothills of the Blue Mountains to his neat bungalow with the fabulous view over Kingston Harbour. At 6:25, he walked through the hall to the office at the back. He unlocked the door and locked it again behind him. Miss Trueblood, who passed as his secretary, but was in fact his number 2 and a former chief officer WRNS, would already be sitting in front of the dials inside the dummy filing cabinet. She would have the earphones on and would be making first contact, tapping out his call sign, WXN, on 14 megacycles. There would be a shorthand pad on her elegant knees. Strangways would drop into the chair beside her and pick up the other pair of headphones, and, at exactly 6:28, he would take over from her and wait for the sudden hollowness in the ether that meant that WWW in London was coming in to acknowledge. It was an iron routine. Strangways was a man of iron routine. Unfortunately, strict patterns of behaviour can be deadly if they are read by an enemy. Strangways, a tall, lean man with a black patch over the right eye and the sort of aquiline good looks you associate with the bridge of a destroyer, walked quickly across the mahogany-panelled hallway of Queen's Club and pushed through the light mosquito-wired doors and ran down the 3 steps to the path. There was nothing very much on his mind, except the sensual pleasure of the clean, fresh evening air, and the memory of the finesse that had given him his 3 spades. There was this case, of course, the case he was working on, a curious and complicated affair that M had rather nonchalantly tossed over the air at him 2 weeks earlier, but it was going well. A chance lead into the Chinese community had paid off. Some odd angles had come to light, for the present the merest shadows of angles, but if they gelled, thought Strangways, as he strode down the gravel path and into Richmond Road, he might find himself involved in something very odd indeed. Strangways shrugged his shoulders. Of course it wouldn't turn out like that. The fantastic never materialized in his line of business. There would be some drab solution that had been embroidered by overheated imaginations and the usual hysteria of the Chinese. Automatically, another part of Strangways' mind took in the 3 blind men. They were tapping slowly towards him down the sidewalk. They were about 20 yards away. He calculated that they would pass him a second or 2 before he reached his car. Out of shame for his own health and gratitude for it, Strangways felt for a coin. He ran his thumbnail down its edge to make sure it was a florin and not a penny. He took it out. He was parallel with the beggars. How odd! They were all Chigros. How very odd! Strangways' hand went out. The coin clanged in the tin cup. "Bless you, master," said the leading man. "Bless you," echoed the other two. The car key was in Strangways' hand. Vaguely he registered the moment of silence as the tapping of the white sticks ceased. It was too late. As Strangways had passed the last man, all three had swivelled. The back two had fanned out a step to have a clear field of fire. 3 revolvers, ungainly with their sausage-shaped silencers, whipped out of holsters concealed among the rags. With disciplined precision the 3 men aimed at different points down Strangways' spine, one between the shoulders, one in the small of the back, one at the pelvis. The 3 heavy coughs were almost won. Strangways' body was hurled forward as if it had been kicked. It lay absolutely still in the small puff of dust from the sidewalk. It was 6:17. With a squeal of tires, a dingy motor hearse with black plumes flying from the 4 corners of its roof took the T intersection into Richmond Road and shot down towards the group on the pavement. The 3 men had just had time to pick up Strangways' body when the hearse slid to a stop abreast of them. The double doors at the back were open, so was the plain deal coffin inside. The 3 men manhandled the body through the doors and into the coffin. They climbed in. The lid was put on and the doors pulled shut. The 3 Negroes sat down on 3 of the 4 little seats at the corners of the coffin and unhurriedly laid their white sticks beside them. Roomy black alpaca coats hung over the backs of the seats. They put the coats on over their rags. Then they took off their baseball caps and reached down to the floor and picked up black top hats and put them on their heads. The driver, who also was a Chinese Negro, looked nervously over his shoulder. "Go, man, go!" said the biggest of the killers. He glanced down at the luminous dial of his wristwatch. It said 6:20. Just 3 minutes for the job. Dead on time. The hearse made a decorous U-turn and moved at a sedate speed up to the intersection. There it turned right, and at 30 miles an hour it cruised genteelly up the tarmac highway towards the hills, its black plumes streaming the doleful signal of its burden, and the 3 mourners sitting bolt upright with their arms crossed respectfully over their hearts. WXN calling, WWW. WXN calling, WWW. WXN, WXN, WXN. The centre finger of Mary Trueblood's right hand stabbed softly, elegantly at the key. She lifted her left wrist. 6:28. He was a minute late. Mary Trueblood smiled at the thought of the little open sunbeam tearing up the road towards her. Now, in a second, she would hear the quick step, then the key in the lock, and he would be sitting beside her. There would be the apologetic smile as he reached for the earphones. "Sorry, Mary, damned car wouldn't start." Or, "You'd think the blasted police knew my number by now. Stopped me at Halfway Tree." Mary Trueblood took the second pair of earphones off their hook and put them on his chair to save him half a second. WXN calling WWW. WXN calling WWW. She tuned the dial a hair's breadth and tried again. Her watch said 6:29. She began to worry. In a matter of seconds, London would be coming in. Suddenly, she thought, God, what could she do if Strangways wasn't on time? It was useless for her to acknowledge London and pretend she was him. Useless and dangerous. Radio security would be monitoring the call as they monitored every call from an agent. Those instruments which measured the minute peculiarities in an operator's fist would at once detect it wasn't Strangways at the key. Mary Trueblood had been shown the forest of dials in the quiet room on the top floor at headquarters, had watched as the dancing hands registered the weight of each pulse, the speed of each cipher group, the stumble over a particular letter.